Hello and welcome, guys. Welcome to yet another episode of the Away Gooners podcast. This is Pop here. I'm going to be talking about the Brentford game that we watched yesterday. I'm joined in by a guest, Tom. Tom is as a co-host of a podcast called FPL for Dummies. And I know his Twitter profile says so many other things than what it is. So, Tom, hi, how are you going?
I'm good. I'm good. Well, I was doing well until yesterday afternoon, but not too bad, thank you. Yeah, not too bad.
It's still a blip, I would say, no?
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, no, it's been a great start to the season for us. So, I mean, I wasn't expecting too much yesterday. I mean, the form you guys have been in, it was maybe not as badly as it went, but it was it could have been much better. But yeah, no, I'm
So,
not complaining
Tom, do
too
you want
much.
to give an intro about yourselves more than what I just mentioned in
Yeah,
line?
yeah, sure. Yeah, my name's Tom. I'm a co-host of a podcast called the FPL Dummies, which is mainly based on fantasy football. Do it with a friend of mine that I've done it for a couple of years now, just chatting about football. I've been a Brentford fan for way too long. Yeah, my family have all been Brentford fans, so stuck with that. So I watched Brentford down in League Two and now in the Premier League. So it's been pretty good few years for us. I mean, well, pretty good 10, 15 years for us. Yeah, try to go as many games as possible, but I live across the country a little bit far from London, so try and get to as many as I can. But yeah, and so I do a podcast with the guys. I also am Brentford correspondent for another podcast, which I do sort of as and when, more based again on fantasy football. But yeah,
Nice.
that's me.
That's quite a lot. That's quite a lot. I can't actually fit it in. So I'll probably add all the links and everything in the description for people who want to follow. Please,
Sure.
please give it a follow, I would say, because I mean I had a look at some of Tom's contents. It's so good. I don't play much of fantasy football, so I don't know much about it. But then the content that he's been providing, is top notch. So I would definitely recommend for anyone to follow Tom's channel and then possibly support him in whatever that he's doing. And also with the fact that we've been getting a lot of encouragement much more these days, but then we need a bit more too. So if you could actually help us by subscribing or supporting our channel, that means quite a lot to all of us who've been doing the work here. So with that out of the way, I'll probably get into the game. So Tom, I know, I mean, you have an FPL pod, and then you obviously look at all the players and teams and who could potentially, create an impact. You picked up from the Arsenal team ahead of the Brentford game.
Yeah, so I mean, Gabriel Jesus, obviously, I mean, it's the standout I think this year, and I think between him and Martinelli have been, I mean, both just been incredible this season. So I've owned those two players, but I mean, there's been so many good picks this year for Arsenal. I mean, everyone just seems to be really underpriced from a fantasy point of view. I mean, Saliba's been fantastic, and obviously Martin Odegaard as well. I mean, those four really are the standouts. Have just
No,
been, I mean,
before, if you look back at before the start of the game, I mean, last year experience was completely surreal, I would say, because it was the start of the fresh new season, and then you guys were just bouncing back into the Premier League after a long while.
yeah.
And then even after that, it was just the first game after the COVID restrictions came through. It was something of just short of a spectacle, that I would say, because it was so good. The atmosphere was so electric.
Yeah.
How were your expectations in the build up to the game? I mean, as a Brentford fan, obviously that you would be taking in all of these into account, and then you'd be having certain expectations as a fan going into this game.
I think this year was a lot different. I think last year was sort of first game in the Premier League. If we're talking about the home game for us anyway, last year was completely different. I mean, you guys, well, firstly, you guys got absolutely ravaged by COVID, I think, just before the game. So I think you were missing 6, 7 main players, whereas we were obviously coming in fresh with no injuries. And it was sort of, you could almost, I think it was almost one of those, before even the game started, you could see the will of, us wanting to go out and put a performance for the first game. I think yesterday was completely different, because I think for 2 reasons, really. One, you aren't the same Arsenal team that you were last season, I don't believe, especially at the start of last season. I mean, you had sort of quite a rocky start of last season, but what Arteta's done this year, and from the outside looking in, it looks like he's built in, a squad that wants to play for each other. The way you guys have started this season, I mean, has been, and won't be top of the league at the moment, so can't be going too badly wrong. And I think for us, it's going into the game. I mean, we've got a couple of sort of key injuries, so in places really where if we were going to really challenge yesterday, we would have needed them playing. So I mean, Christian Norgard in defensive midfield. I mean, he has been, I think, our best player since we've gone up, and he is one of those players that was really needed yesterday. I mean, I think Vitaly is a really good player, but I think in a game like yesterday, we more than likely would have had them both playing, or I think we would have had them both playing, because we really needed that to sort of stop your midfield. We're also missing Ethan Pinnock as well. So as good as Christopher obviously just came out, was his first start in the start of this season. So I mean, he had a bit of a bad game, but it's his first game back from injury, and it's not like he's come off the bench. It was straight for 90 minutes. And so yeah, I think those 2 key. I mean, missing Pinnock, I just coming back, and Christian Norgard, especially from a defensive point of view. I mean, Martinelli almost scored in the 2nd minute, and it was just completely cut us open. So from the expectation yesterday and how you guys have been playing since the start of the season, I wasn't expecting too much. Okay. I was expecting it to be a better game. I thought we'd do better, but it was a mixture, I believe, of you guys playing really well and us playing quite poorly as well.
I think as an Arsenal fan, when I spoke about during the preview, I certainly expected an Arsenal win, but then not to the ease that we all witnessed that. Right? Yeah. It was a complete surprise, because what I really expected from Brentford yesterday was a team who actually, matched it up with our physical abilities, challenges in all the tackles and all those sort of things, come through in the aerial duels, because that was one part where we completely missed it out last year. And that was where I was expecting. You made some smart signings as well over the window, with Hickey and then Damsgaard, to name a few. So I was expecting definitely a much better Brentford team, especially in front of their home. But then what sort of surprised me as we went into the game was it was completely one-sided straight from the start. And I thought probably after a while that, Arsenal will start to drop back. But then, I mean, even after they're scoring their 3rd goal, it felt like Arsenal would be more likely to be scoring the 4th one, rather than, Brentford trying to do. Could you actually talk about what all things that went against the game plan that you would have possibly had?
I think the main thing was really the control in the midfield you had. You just seemed to, I mean, usually we're building out from the back, and it just seemed to be every ball out from the back was just, I mean, you guys just seemed to just be all over us. It was very much like it was almost like what we do, where we sort of swarm players and but you were just doing it to us, and we just couldn't get out from it. I mean, not having the control in the middle. I mean, I think the issue we probably had is Josh Da Silva wasn't really on top form yesterday. And because he's more of an attacking player and was playing with Jensen, I was surprised that they both started, because I thought what he's been doing since Norgard's been out is playing Janelt with Shandon Baptiste, who's more of a defensive-minded midfielder. Yeah. And I thought yesterday he would try that, because it would be more to counteract what you guys had in the middle and give us a bit more control, which we just didn't have of any of the ball, really. But I say I don't know what I do have in front of me, but yeah, I mean, you guys had 64% of the ball yesterday, which was expected. I mean, I don't think it was unexpected that you guys control the ball, but we just couldn't really get out from where we were. Just every single, as we do, we play from Raya outwards. But every time we had the ball, it was just like there was a play out like straight on us. We couldn't really get ourselves out. So I think the lack of control in the middle really, really didn't help. And therefore we.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the goals as such, so I felt that you had players, you had the right players in the position, just that Arsenal were able to capitalize on the mistakes. For example, if I were to talk about Saliba's goal that he scored from the corner, he outjumped or he outfoxed Toney there because Ivan was standing in the right place. All that he had to do is just rise up. He probably didn't notice the fact that Saliba would actually come around in front of him and then sort of outhead him into that goal. So it almost the first two goals that you got that you conceded were mostly around set pieces or dead balls coming through into the box and then heading them in. You felt that it was not the Brentford that you see week in, week out.
I think we're a bit off the pace yesterday. I mean, the first goal I thought was a great header from Saliba. I think it's the movement from Saliba more than the defender. I mean, Toney's a striker. I mean, he's not a defender. He's a good header of the ball, but obviously from a defensive mind, that's what was missing. I mean, having someone on the back post and that goal doesn't go in, and I don't understand why. I think that was what was more missing from the first goal. The second ball, I mean, the ball from Xhaka was pretty nice. It was a beautiful, beautiful cross, and yeah, I mean, there's not too much you can do with that. I mean, that was just a really, really good goal. I mean, I know obviously you go Fabio Vieira's goal. I think all three. I think the first one was the most avoidable one. Second one I thought was, honestly, just good play, really more from Arsenal than poor defending. I mean, Ponta's probably got caught out a little bit, just not following Jesus as well with the run. But and then the third goal, I mean, that was just that's that you can't stop those.
Yeah,
that's a great goal.
Mean, I felt that probably Brentford, I mean, you guys gave too much space and time for Vieira, that he had all the time in the world to sort of, just try his luck in. I mean, it wouldn't really sound like a luck, but then he was very sure almost where he was going to try his shot on. But then he had all the space and the time to sort of take the shot properly. So yeah. I felt that probably the defense went sleeping around there. Yeah, I mean, just to take a step back, right? You've been having, as you mentioned, you obviously had a fantastic start to the season, just like how you did last one. You had a great result against United at home, thumping them 4-0. How different, what did you see? I mean, of course, the team wasn't having the same intensity as the United game, but then how you felt that Brentford lacked or were caught out against Arsenal of this season?
I think it was more that you guys played a lot better rather than we played really poorly. I didn't think we had our best game in the world, but we actually didn't. The whole game itself, if you watched it, it wasn't. I didn't watch it and go, we've been awful. It's just one of those where it's just like, you were much better. And obviously, you expect that. I think in the United game, you could see there wasn't as much of the team structure at the time with what Ten Hag's doing. So that was very easy to be exploited. I mean, he'd only been in for a few games and we could play. I mean, playing off the counter was just so easy. I mean, they weren't doing what you did yesterday, where they weren't pressing us. They were giving us time on the ball. They were letting us get those out balls. Whereas Arsenal yesterday, just every single time, every ball we had, it was just like someone was on them. It was like, it was very difficult for us to get out. I think that's the main difference we had with the United game. We had a lot more time and space, and therefore we could just get those out balls. And I mean, the best example I think was the fourth goal we scored against United, where it was just a clearance upfield, but the break was just so easy to do. We could leave Mbeumo and Toney upfield a bit more. Whereas yesterday you could see, well, I mean, Toney's and Mbeumo's tracking back. That, I mean, there were points in the game where we had a chance to counter, but there was no one upfield because we had to bring all the players back to try and counter what you guys were doing. So you could see the levels in quality. I mean, we're still talking about Brentford is a relatively small club. I mean, from a club spend point of view, I think they're still bottom. I don't think anyone spent less overall. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, obviously in the transfer window, we spent more than certain clubs this window. But from an actual grand, if you look at the likes of Fulham, Nottingham Forest,
of course, you don't bring in Forest here.
No, but if you look at those sort of like teams, they're like from a club value, from how much money they have to spend. Yeah, I mean, if we are talking about Forest, then yeah, we don't have a £200,000 Jesse Lingard on the books, for example. From a value, and so it's more of a team. And then obviously you look at the likes of Arsenal, who are able to spend, values in players that we obviously can't. And so there's always going to be a quality difference between the two teams. And usually you see that we rise to a lot of, games last year, we look at a 3-0 against Liverpool. A couple of, I think it was a 1-0 against Man City, which we lost. But the game itself, we could have got something from that game. Obviously, being yourselves' first game of the season, and like playing against those big teams, we've always seemed to have performed quite well. I think. Whereas yesterday, I think, it's the first time I've seen where we've just been very much outplayed by a very good Arsenal side. You played well. I couldn't take away from that.
It just everything fell into place, as what I would say, because even I spoke about to a few Arsenal fans here, and then as well as during our preview recording, none of us really predicted a clean sheet as such, because there was an all sort of an error in one of our defenders all the time. I wouldn't really blame anyone in particular, but just that sometimes we tend to do some silly mistakes and all those sort of things. Mm-hmm. But then it felt very quiet yesterday. Quieter to the point that I almost felt like Ramsdale didn't have anything to do at all, except for one free kick, but that too went on top of the bar. So he didn't really have anything much to do, I felt. So it felt, everything sort of fell in the right place. Now, taking, moving away from the game, if you actually look back into the run of games ahead, of course, we have a big World Cup break coming up in between, and a lot of players from Brentford will as well be participating in there with Ivan. Possibly, I don't know. If in case everything goes to plans, he might as well be on the flight there to Qatar. So we don't know.
We hope so.
We hope so. Yeah. But what would be Brentford's expectations for the rest of the season? I know you outpunched yourselves last year, so for you to go one step better would be still a miracle. But still, what would be your personal expectations or fans' expectations for the season?
I think for me, anything. So I think the if we're being realistic, I don't think there's. I would like to finish mid-table. I think a mid-table finish would be fantastic. If we finish above the relegation zones, I think that should be seen as an achievement as well. Once you have those couple of seasons in the Premier League and you can start to establish yourself, that's when you can start to go, right, we are now a Premier League side. And I think we will. I think we'll be absolutely fine this year. And I think the performances we've shown so far, we've leaked a lot of goals at the start of the season, but that's, as I mentioned a moment ago, mainly down to, I think, injuries at the back, which the goalkeeper's fantastic, and it's just sort of shoring up the middle of the defence, which will come once we have players back from injury, and it's we have more of that strength and depth, which we've got from the likes of securing Ben Mee this year, which has been a great signing, but
on a free, that too,
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Great signing. But obviously he's a player that's getting older. He's not a young player, and I think we signed him. He's our oldest player at the club now. But for me, mid-table would be fantastic. I think that's where we should aim to be this year, and I think that's something where we can be with the results we've played so far, and looking at other teams' performances around us at the moment. I think that's probably a good place to try and aim for. Anything above that, obviously, incredible. But anything below that, above the relegation zone, is also should be seen as a positive. And I think we had a really bad run last year where I think we went 8 or 9 games without a win, maybe 10, I believe it was in the end.
Yeah.
And at the end, I think at the end of the 8th game, I think Thomas Frank signed a new contract. So I think that's the trust that he has from the board and from the fans, really. There's more worry that Thomas Frank gets poached by a big club rather than Thomas Frank getting sacked. Which is a lovely place to be as a club at the moment. So,
see, I think personally for me, I really love watching what Thomas has actually done there. Been following Brentford for quite a while, I can't appreciate the work that he has put in there to bring the team thus far. And more importantly, as you said, it's a second season which is more cautious than the first one, because first one some of the teams might actually tend to stay up. But then the second is what really bites them at the back. Sheffield United, for instance, in the most recent times, and then Leeds almost by a scrap of luck or, results going their way, that they managed to stay up the second season. So it's very important that you keep your heads, low, and then still just aim for scrapping beyond those relegation places, if you can. But even otherwise, Thomas has done a fantastic job. He's been amazing there so far, and I mean, I envy many of those players and signings that you've made. Hickey for once, that
absolutely.
I badly wanted to actually, I had hope that he might actually feature in this Arsenal team sometime, but then that's going to take a back step. But yeah, I mean, you've got fantastic team to work on. Great set of individuals, and yeah, your results as well, except for yesterday. Probably I just feel that you had just an off day, nothing really worked, or probably nothing sort of clicked, put together yesterday. But then yeah, I think overall I feel you've still got a very good season ahead in front of you guys. I feel personally, you would probably be finishing around 10 to 14 somewhere around. So that's how I look at it. Brentford as a team, as long as you guys can actually stay injury free, keep the unit together, that would be the key to go in this World Cup year. Yeah,
absolutely. I don't think we have too many people going away for the World Cup, so it's not. I mean, potentially Toney, as you mentioned, and there may be a few sort of the Danish guys going, like Mathias Jensen, Christian Norgard. I know Raya has been linked with. Has played for Spain as well, but I mean, he would go as sort of probably second or third choice keeper for Spain anyway. So, I mean, hopefully that shouldn't affect too much. And the rest is really the most. And then Frank and Yeka as well. I think he. Yeah. I'm not sure if they got to the World Cup in the end. I have to check, but yeah. I mean, it's not a huge amount of the squad which is going away, which is relatively good for Brentford. Obviously, obviously you'd love to see all these players go to the World Cup but it's not going to happen straight away. So, yeah. Hopefully that doesn't affect us too much, and we don't see obviously too many injuries coming back after the World Cup, which we could see with other teams who have those sort of players, even sort of players, I guess, around sort of where we are.
Yeah.
If you Douglas Luiz at Aston Villa, for example, if he goes and then Aston Villa sort of potentially something happens and they lose that player for a while, then that shouldn't. I mean, there's less chance of that happening with our players, because there's only probably about 5 or 6 that are going.
Totally. See, I don't want to go into the specifics of all the goals and all those sort of things. We did discuss everything in there. But if there is anything else that you would want to discuss about yesterday's game that struck out to you, the moments of magic or anything like that you want to touch upon.
Toney's free kick was quite special, I thought. It's a lot. I mean, I think it's the confidence he's got at the moment. It just shows that where he is at the moment and where he is as a player, to try something that incredibly audacious, like no one was expecting it, and to try. I mean, I think if it's going on target, I think Ramsdale probably saves it, but just to have the confidence at the moment, just to go, yeah, I'm taking this, I'm going to take that on. And I think that was the one little bright spark you saw from what we had. I thought Damsgaard as well was very good when he came off the bench as well. Obviously had the attempt which he sort of mishit a little bit, I'd say, but to make the run, got in the right position. Obviously still coming back to full fitness. I think when we see him at full fitness, could be a really, really special player, obviously incredibly young as well. So we've shown quite well over the years that we have a really good way of developing players, young players at Brentford. I mean, if you look through the Premier League now, there's scatterings of Brentford players that are in and around the Premier League who've been there for quite a few years now. Yeah. The likes of, Neil Maupay at Everton, Ollie Watkins, Tarkowski last year, obviously for Burnley. And there's more. So yeah, to see them sort of what we're doing with those sort of players. So like the Mikel Damsgaards coming through, it'll be really interesting to see how he develops this year. And once he's back up to full fitness and see him play, that'll be quite exciting, I think.
Nice. Talking about young players, we had one of our own coming on the bench. Nwaneri.
Crazy.
Nwaneri, yeah. What are your initial thoughts based on what you've seen? I mean, it was just a little cameo, I would say. too early to judge. And then I think before yesterday, much of the fans, didn't even know that such a player actually existed in our books. But then I was reading that he had been tracking interest from other bigger clubs in Europe, so Arsenal had to fast track his progress, and then possibly the result or the scoreline yesterday meant that Arsenal could be audacious in giving him a role or some time on the pitch as well. What were your thoughts?
So I mean, I couldn't really comment too much on his performance because obviously it was so short. But I think it's more about the fact he come on in the first place, the fact that Arteta trusts a player that young to, even if it's for moments. I mean, and obviously you were well clear in, but I think that to have someone to get that young to come onto the pitch, they obviously must have a huge. I mean, Arteta does a good job, I think, of bringing on young players. I mean, if you look at the average age of your squad yesterday, I think it was about 24 years old. It's an incredibly young squad. Probably reduced a little bit more by a 15-year-old coming on, but it just shows the sort of the manager Arteta is, but also the belief he has in a player like that. So just to bring him on in the first place, to give him that taste of Premier League, is to go, he must think that this player has something that, to give him that sort of experience at such a young age. Because I mean, what were they saying yesterday? He's only 15. He hasn't even finished the GCSEs yet. I mean, incredible.
Yeah, I was just following the chants going around in the stadium there. He's just 15, and then he must be going to school the next day or something like that.
Absolutely. No, it's always nice to see, whether it's, I mean, it's probably not the nicest to see when it's against you and you're losing 3-0, but I mean, it shows more. So I think it shows there must be something special about him to play him at a 15-year-old. I mean, there must be he's a 15-year-old and he's playing for the under-21s. He's got to be pretty good. So I don't think I could really tell you much about, obviously, from what I saw yesterday. He was on as a very fleeting cameo, but the fact that he's a 15-year-old playing in the under-21s for Arsenal and gets his first start for Arsenal in the Premier League, first sub appearance, he's got to have something about him that makes him want to be picked. So that's what
we all hope.
One to watch. Absolutely, yeah, one to watch. I mean, hopefully we see him develop rather than you see lots of youngsters have small cameos and you don't see them for a while. But
yeah,
I mean, and I'm sure we won't for a while. I mean, as 15 years old, we probably won't see him for another few years properly if he does come through. But hopefully, fingers crossed, that'd be cool to see. So
yeah. Awesome. I think that's as much as what I wanted to discuss as part of this recording. It was a pleasure having you on.
Really good speech.
And coming on in a very short notice, I would say. So yeah, thank you really for coming down and having a chat. And as I said earlier, best of luck for the rest of the season, except for the game that you're going to be playing against Arsenal, the reverse fixture. But yeah, I mean, as a neutral, if I look at Brentford, I see nothing but great potential up there. And I like the team. I like what Thomas has been setting up there. It's something that I really, really want to, continue in the Premier League. You need teams who can actually come up and then, stand up to the big teams. Definitely, Brentford is right up there. So yeah, definitely, I think you guys are going to be doing much better in this seasons to come. So yeah, thank you once again for coming down. Yeah, we'll
no problem.
Hope to chat again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me. It's been good fun. So thank you very much.
Thank you.